Hello all, welcome back. I'm still trying to get over how pumped that music's getting me each time. But welcome back everybody. Thank you for joining our next session. I'm going to pass over to Jane and Lisa very shortly on this, but I just wanted to also mention if some of you have been trying to get into the workshop but haven't been able to try and refresh your page and try again. There was some sort of technical issues with that, but some people who registered earlier should be able to get in now. But without further ado, I'll hand over to Jane and Lisa.
Brilliant. And hello again and welcome back, everyone. Thank you for joining us for a very exciting session we have, Turning Data into Donations. I will be joined by Jane Treneman, who's the EMEA Nonprofit Strategic Advisor at Salesforce.org. We want to thank Salesforce.org for their support as Platinum Partners of Fundraising Day 2022. Do check their page in the partner section to see how they can help the sector with digital fundraising, marketing and engagement. As we enter the cost of living crisis, where budget tightens, how can we drive income growth? That's what Jane is going to help us with today. Digital acceleration has revealed data weaknesses, but also gave space for innovation and fresh income opportunities. So in this session, you'll have the opportunity to better understand the benefits of optimizing your supporter experience, maximizing your internal efficiencies, and growing your income through scale, agility, and engagement. So without further ado, let me hand over to Jane. And hello, Jane.
So much, Lisa. Hello, and I'll just share my slides there. So thank you very much again to Charity Digital for the invitation to do this session. It's a topic I'm personally really passionate about. And thanks to all of you for your time and attention for what I hope will be a bit of an inspiration session. And yeah, Lisa, as you say, I think that this period over the last few years has been full of challenges and full of learnings. And I think we've seen some stuff exposed in terms of manual processes, weaknesses in data as everything got their kind of digital acceleration has taken off. But it's also, I think, given real space for innovation, permission to experiment and try new things. But ultimately, as we face a cost of living crisis, there's two elements of maximizing your ROI and fundraising. Like one is growing your income and the other is, operational efficiency, I guess. And for me, where these two things come together is in this whole realm of supporter experience and data-driven fundraising. So hence where efficiency meets affinity. So it's a win-win situation. So I'm going to kind of speed through these slides and hopefully leave some time for some Q&A. A little bit about me, first of all. So I joined Salesforce a year ago, having worked in a lot of different fundraising leadership roles in nonprofits of all shapes and sizes. In various roles from CRM, supporter engagement, individual giving, corporate, and trustee positions as well. And before that, I worked in consumer insights for a decade. So I've always had that kind of data-driven lens through things, which I brought into fundraising. And Salesforce has been working with nonprofits for over 20 years now, again, of all shapes and sizes. So I think it's a really interesting role in the strategic advisor role, where we get to essentially join the dots between fundraising strategy and the capabilities of our platform, and really the connecting tissue between those things is often your data strategy. But I wanted to pause for a minute, just because I think it's always helpful to know how to pitch the session, to get a sense of what roles you are in. So if you could launch that poll there, Lisa, that would be great. And just to get a sense of where in the organization you are sitting. So is it within fundraising, or do we have some curious parties from other parts of the organization? And just get a feel for where we are. So we give that another minute. Okay. So has that closed now? So it looks like it's all marketing and communications from where I'm sitting. We might just end this poll. Oh no, hang on. It's okay. So generally marketing and fundraising, I think, is where we are. A little bit of finance and digital thrown in, but I suppose increasingly this is such a cross-functional effort to bring a really sort of data-driven digital fundraising strategy to life. But that's really helpful. Thank you very much. And the other thing that I'm really conscious of is that, you know, data-driven fundraising, digital fundraising, I think it can mean different things to different people, but ultimately it's always a bit of a journey to get there. I think often I use this analogy of crawl, walk, run, to understand those different phases of really leveraging your data from a fundraising perspective. So, you know, starting off with just making sure you've got the, you know, the foundation in terms of security and compliance and hygiene established. Then getting into some more maybe classification and geodemographic profiling or segmentation, before getting into maybe some more advanced analytics or even kind of AI and predictive marketing and automation. So if I can just one more poll before we get into things, if you can give me a sense of where you are on that journey. If we can just launch the second poll there. Lisa, you know, are you just starting off on that journey? Are you curious and you haven't even started yet? Or do you think you're already sort of fairly well into that journey? Because I think sometimes it's trying to pitch the session to meet everybody is challenging, but it would be helpful to get a sense of where everybody is. Just give it one more minute. Interesting. Okay. So a bit of a mix. We've got a few brave people who are running with this stuff. A lot of people kind of curious or in that kind of early foundation stage, and then people trying. So I think that's great, because I think this session, hopefully what you'll get out of it, you know, if you're really kind of interested in making a step forward, or if you're trying to reinvigorate some stuff and just get it to the next stage, hopefully this will give you some nice material to spark some ideas, but also to engage some of your internal stakeholders. So because I think in my experience, you know, I'm speaking to nonprofits every day, and I've worn many hats throughout this journey on the other side of the fence too. And I think a lot of common challenges, no matter what stage you're at of the journey, you know, that sometimes, well, what we're hearing a lot is that existing data or systems are really limiting the scale of the operation, if not just from an acquisition perspective, from that kind of stewardship and cultivation of relationships to really maximize that lifetime value. And sometimes when you don't have engagement with data, it becomes that kind of negative circle, and championing engagement internally is difficult, and you want to get into a more virtuous circle, which we can describe. The speed to launch, whether it's an emergency campaign or maybe being reactive to the media, as many of us found ourselves in the pandemic, can be limited if you've got to go through a lot of clunky processes and your data is not clean. And really, yeah, ultimately what you want to get to that point of having at that seamless supporter journey, which is the utopian destination. And sometimes it's quite disjointed, and it's difficult to know even how to leverage different types of data. So we're going to do a bit of a whistle-stop tour through all of this over the next 15 minutes to talk about some of that, a little bit of strategic context before, why should I really get excited about this, or should my internal stakeholders be prioritizing this, and talk a little bit about that inspirational success story or the single supporter view, which are these two, as I say, two utopian destinations. So first off, maybe just to set a bit of context, I don't think I need to explain to you what the last few years have been like. We've all been living it together. But I think suffice to say that even before the pandemic, fundraising was going through an evolution in terms of its digitization, or it was becoming increasingly data driven. We've come a long way from where we thought, well, maybe we'll do an email version of our DM, and that'll be a kind of an integrated campaign. And with that, there's been more donor experience brought into focus, albeit sometimes more in the realms of the larger organizations. But thinking about more integration of segments, of journeys, of platforms, you know, this conversation had started a long time ago. And before hybrid teams became synonymous with remote working, I think it was this idea of having to have cross-functional teams from, or task forces across some of the different functions and teams that are represented here today that need to come together to really deliver a supporter-centric campaign or strategy. And payment methods were already starting to widen in terms of options, but probably more considered from an operational point of view rather than one of being driven by donor choice. But over the last few years, all of this stuff has really taken over, and the digitization of fundraising has gone from, that initial flurry of the pandemic of trying to get all the traditional offline activities online to actually increasingly seeing digital and data as central to fundraising strategy, and doing that in order to try and meet these ever increasing expectations of donors in terms of transparency and control, in terms of communications and relevance. And all at the same time, managing this huge diversification in income streams, payment methods, segments, etc. It's been a really hugely rapidly changing time. And all of these teams and skills that are needed that have gone beyond even having to have that hybrid team, but even hybrid roles and skill sets that have been evolving really rapidly, and really trying to have that agility to move faster, which the sector really demonstrated itself capable of, but having that supporter first digitally led fundraising strategy that is really becoming an increasingly core hygiene factor. And just really briefly, I think if we think about this from a strategic perspective, in an ideal world, as an organization, we have our organizational goals and impacts and targets, that falls from that seamlessly, this cascade of functional strategy or fundraising strategy right down to campaign performance, and that all of this could be measurable and data driven. And that there can be reports, etc., that are developed for every audience at the different stages of this, that can actually hang it all together. And that's kind of primarily looking at it through a performance lens, but I think that's a kind of an interesting overarching picture. But overall, none of this really matters if there's not a fundamental kind of culture and belief of something that data-driven approaches are adding value. And so we won't totally tackle the idea of cultural change during the session, but again, try and give you some of those engaging kind of messages to bring back to the organization. So as I mentioned before, the reason data gets me excited, and it's not just because I'm someone who used to work at Insights and, took that to fundraising. This is kind of relevant for everybody, because I think what I so often see is, if whatever your platform is from a CRM perspective, the bridge between your strategy and your platform is your data strategy, and what shape your data is in and how you can leverage it. And this is a bit of a composite story that I can put together, which I hope some of you might kind of empathize with or find cathartic. But I know that when you have silos within your organization, that creates platform silos, that creates data silos, different procedures. So different types of supporters could be sitting in lots of different places. And without that consistency of procedures and data input, there's all these nuances and quirks in the data that it means that there's only a couple of people maybe in the organization that really know how to pull a report, which creates massive bottlenecks and means you can't be assessing campaigns in real time. In fact, it might take you some time after the campaign is even over to do a review. So your decision making in the dark. And I've been that person where you have like such an unreliable data foundation that you can't confidently use it for personalization either, because you're just not sure if the hygiene is where it needs to be. And all of that summed up in a lot of places I worked with a real lack of engagement with your platform, with your data, because even the people putting in the data were just saw it as an administrative black hole, and they didn't see what was coming out of it. So where I saw the benefits of having data that was more integrated, it gave a foundation then for more cross-functional work with visibility and something to really hang on to, and really simple things like having pie charts or dashboards going into senior stakeholder emails, who may not even have a license, gave them a sense of, again, what's coming out of this platform and what this system and what's this data telling us, and being able to optimize stuff in real time, do personalization, do automation, ultimately became like this. Because the word data doesn't excite everybody, but I think ultimately, if you think about what data represents, that is fundamentally your mission and your impact, and it's what can fuel so much of what you need to accomplish in terms of income and engagement and that impact. And in a digital era, the data is your donor. So as I always say, you have to show it some love, you have to nurture it and cultivate it, because what it can do then is open up this possibility for a truly audience-centric, supporter-centric fundraising strategy that can deliver the right message to the right people at the right time and meet them where they are, because you have that understanding of the supporter experience, you have insights into their motivations, and you can drive both the softer side of loyalty as well as that harder kind of base management or donor development side that is well informed and executed from that perspective. And this is where affinity meets efficiency, is for me, where donor experience just comes into its own. And what do I mean by donor experience? I mean, I guess if you think about when a donor comes on board with your organization, their journey begins with their first payment that may or may not get an automated response, and then that can continue on into a wider journey. And depending on how integrated your systems are, or what kind of data you're collecting and how you're using it to target people, that will really have a big influence on their experience. So the double-sided benefits of this is that, from the charity's perspective, you're getting that efficiency. With a data-driven approach, you're going to have your lower non-starter rate, you're going to have improved retention. It will drive lifetime value. And from the donor side, they're having a really good experience. It's seamless, it's relevant, it's engaging, and it's affirming their decision to support you in the first place and creating that emotional proximity that, as we'll talk about in a minute, is just even more key now. So if we think about it, first of all, from the nuts and bolts, if you're acquiring and investing in acquisition, whatever those different channels are, you're filling a funnel that's going to need management of kind of rolling and ongoing nurturing and development. And to be able to do that at scale, you need to have that data flow working for you, or else you can put a lot of money into acquisition and then be left wondering, well, what are we going to do with these donors afterwards, or how are we going to steward them, or how long is it going to take to process these donations we've been flooded with before we can even thank people. So I think I would always be a massive advocate of thinking through that journey before you launch into your acquisition. But it's not just an efficiency piece. If you're thinking about investing in acquisition and you want to maximize your return, you want to be sure that you're doing some really smart targeting. If you're doing social or digital acquisition, that you're using lookalike audiences and kind of clever ways of making sure that you're not just kind of batch and blast approach to acquisition. But then also after that, I think this Open did a great webinar last month around the cost of living crisis. And I think one of the key outtakes for me was this, not all causes are created equal. And there was an analogy in that session of, do you want to be Now TV or do you want to be Netflix? That you have to kind of weave this emotional switching cost and proximity into your relationship with these donors, because you need to have that engagement and that relevance and that connection with them more than ever to really maintain that loyalty going into a challenging period economically. And there's this kind of age-old story arc from a donor engagement point of view, where you want to be, first of all, taking people on board and affirming that they've made the right choice, that this is the organization for them, and that the work that they're passionate about is going to be carried out, and that impact will be made, and that you then demonstrate that impact before going on to ask them to give more. And it's always, how do you manage this at scale without leveraging data to its full potential? You want to be able to trigger this communication with the day 1, day 30, day 90, etc., like of a donor's journey with you, rather than thinking of it through the lens of, we have a calendar of campaigns or events that we're going to push out regardless of where these people are in their journey. And to always know that we've inspired and reinforced their message of the impact we're making before we go back to ask for more. I think that's really important and quite exciting. And I think the ultimate utopia of trying to bring people through that journey always draws on this idea of the single supporter view, or the 360-degree view of the donor, or you'll hear a lot of different ways of talking about this. And is this an achievable utopia? Like, how do we get here? And I think this is one example. And again, it's thinking about how you would deepen your affinity with a supporter. And you could have one supporter who ticks every single one of these boxes. They could give to you in more than one way and also be a volunteer. They could have signed a petition online. They may even be a payroll giver in the corporate that you have a relationship with, or they could be shopping in your retail network if that's something that you have as an organization. But how many of the data from these different platforms are brought together so that you can really understand, if you've got people that tick all of these boxes, how do you wrap your arms around them and really make sure that they remain loyal? And how do you understand and really tap into that passion and engagement and motivation that a supporter like that has? And I think, just not to get too philosophical, but to pause for a minute and say, there is this kind of utopian view of the single view, and then there's whatever on the other end of the spectrum from utopia, there's this kind of dystopian world where everything went a bit wrong. But I think if we can just look at the concept of protopia through this, so it's it might just be a little bit better, but the best things happen kind of one step at a time, and sometimes something like this seems really overwhelming. But I think, in other words, it's kind of that concept of continuous innovation, or, as I always kind of refer back to, how do you eat an elephant? And it's one bite at a time. And this is not intended to be a sales pitch session, but for me, this is why I ended up working in Salesforce, because I drank the Kool-Aid as a customer over 10 years ago. But it's the possibility and the very real option of having all of these different areas of your fundraising and wider nonprofit activities in one place, so that you can tell if someone is a fundraiser and a volunteer, but also have access to all that program management, impact statistics, human stories, even that are collected in the field, all on one platform. And I've seen this working, and it's really exciting. So just to wrap up before questions, with a little last note of inspiration. We were at the IFC a couple of weeks ago, where I got to do a session with the UNHCR international team, and also Eileen Strakendal from Sweden. And they had been through an implementation of Salesforce a couple of years ago, where before they had that implementation, they would have for each campaign they wanted to set up, they would set up a bespoke segmentation and set of kind of email journey, etc. And it might take them 5 or 6 hours to do that. Then they would send it, they'd see what worked, they'd test, and then they'd analyze it manually, then go back, do another segmentation for 5 or 6 hours, etc., etc. It was a very time-consuming process, and they got it down to a point there using the Salesforce core platform and the marketing cloud piece, where they would actually have pre-established campaign set up with all the segmentations, and at a push of a button, that would not only take off that was already set up, but it would optimize itself. So it would pick different A/B testing, select the best performing one, etc., etc. So it all went down to maybe half an hour to set it up at the beginning and tweak at the odd time. And their revenue had gone up 60%. Their cost per donor had also gone down considerably. And that was the year before the pandemic. They were tapping into a wider kind of international model, which isn't relevant to everyone here, but and not a prerequisite, I should say. But what it meant was, when the Ukraine appeal had to be launched, they were able to manage to attract and process huge volumes of donations. And just to put that 250,000 new cash donors in perspective, I believe their donor base before this campaign was 170,000, around that mark. So this was really significant for them. But you know, they were generated 20 million just in their individual giving income, in a relatively, you know, immature market from a UNHCR perspective, with so little kind of set of time. So I think that brought great inspiration to me. So yeah, look, we've been through a lot over the last few years, and there was this overnight evolution where we opened up lots of digital channels, and other channels were offline, but a lot of manual workarounds kind of exposed, and the impact that was having on supporter experience, in terms of the, you know, the seamlessness of the onboarding process, but also how you would manage that at scale and continue to deepen those relationships. But I think also the last few years have really given us permission to try new things, to get innovative, and given us the imperative to do it, and that momentum that we can bring forward to really make sure that acquisition budgets are fully leveraged, smartly used, and then drive that lifetime value and ongoing income growth. So I think now is a nice time to be having these conversations, because it is about really trying to get our heads out of firefighting mode, start thinking, yes, we're in a cost of living crisis, but people starting to think kind of what's our strategy for maybe the next year to 3 years, rather than just worrying about what's right around the corner, and ultimately plotting that future course in how we leverage and optimize traditional channels as they come back online, but also really take advantage of those digital avenues that grew, and how do you use data to join all the dots on your platform to kind of make the most of that going forward. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much for your attention. And I haven't been keeping an eye on the chat yet, but I don't know if you want to tell me if there's any questions here, Lisa.
Brilliant. Well, yeah. Well, thank you very much, Jane. Thank you for a very insightful presentation. We've got a few minutes so to answer any questions. So please do share all of your question in the Q&A section. There was a question, and obviously I had a keen interest in the presentation. What would you, because obviously from a charity perspective, there's a lot of data in different points, whether you have a charity shop or on an online one, and then different, you know, journeys for your supporters. So I would say from a charity perspective, where do you start? How do you analyze which data should be you know, used primarily to achieve more donations?
Yeah, for sure. And I see Nick got a kick out of how to eat an elephant, but I think this is it, right? Like, you have to chew it one bite at a time, lest you choke. So yeah, I think that it's important, if you're thinking about what the first bite of the elephant is, or what that, you know, what that phasing can be, it's I think you start with your own sort of what you're in your circle of control, you know, start with your own fundraising data. So, you know, if your retail is in a separate, you know, I would always bite it into chunks if I can. So for example, when I worked with Trócaire, which is Caritas Ireland, or CAFAD's sister organization in Ireland, you know, we had a lot of different groups of donors. we had just merged our database from to bring campaigners in as well as fundraisers. But I took it a piece at a time. So we took the education audience, the church audience, which was important for a faith-based organization, the campaigners, but we made sure each of those were classified and clean and usable and optimized in the smartest way. And then within our fundraising data, which I think, if that's where your team circle of control is focused on, you look at what data are we collecting from our regular givers, from our cash givers, from our events. And really just, I think there's always this really simple piece of work to do around, I wouldn't go so far as calling it segmentation. I think it's classifying and thinking, what are the fields that we have? And I do have some hidden slides around, what's a useful kind of data to gather. But I would be starting just to carve it into chunks within your fundraising data and just do a data dump of everything in a spreadsheet, if that's easier. Be a big old spreadsheet for some of you. But just see how clean this is. Where do you have fields that actually should be just separate fields, but they've become kind of all blurred into one, which makes them really hard to use. And just make some really simple, pragmatic steps, chunk at a time.
Took at a time for the
That's
elephant.
helpful. It's quite a general answer, but I think it's if anyone has something more specific, it can certainly speak to that. But I think there's lots of ways once you've done that you can look to enrich your data then on an ongoing basis. So incorporate that into your journeys, little surveys, because people love an ask and a call to action that's not financial as well. So you can get more information from them. Consider if you want to invest in a little bit of kind of external, like geodemographic profiling that you can bring onto your database. So things, like Mosaic from Experian, or any of these sort of external options, because it can give you more richness and to your data.
Superb, brilliant. Well, thank you very much. I think that's a very good answer for those of our audience that are that have started, are on their journey to categorizing their data or cleaning up their data. So I think that's a good start. And that's all we'll have time for today. Thank you very much again, Jane, for this very insightful presentation. We really hope that all of you enjoyed it and got some nuggets of information, especially the ones of you that are crawling and walking on their journey. Again, Jane will remain available for a few more minutes on the platform. So if you have any questions for her, please feel free to ping her a direct message. And without further ado, I'll hand over back to Nick. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, both of you. That was fantastic. And I have to let everybody know that I'm pretty sure no elephants were harmed during the duration of that presentation. I hope not, at least. Right, we're going to have a larger break now. So we're going to have about, what time is it now? So just under half an hour break. So you've got time to make yourself something quickly to eat and such. And then we'll be back with the next webinar, which is the guys at Trillium, who will be taking us through how to get the most out of the core donors by optimizing user journeys. On top of that, I just wanted to remind everyone, if you want to get some more resources, check out the partners page for any additional resources from the sector, and it'll give you a chance once again to speak to those speakers and sponsors. On top of that, make sure that you're giving us all your thoughts and feedback on the topics discussed today, and please make sure that you rate all of the sessions. We'd love to know what you think about everything, and it'll help us devise and create sessions for the future as well. So once again, we'll be back in about just over 25 minutes for our next session. Thank you very much.